Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching for a review of what's going on in Harrisburg. And there's a lot to talk about, and then our monthly update from our friends from the business community. All of that and more after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program, and a special thanks to our viewers around the state, and especially to our viewers on WGAL. You've made us the #1 program at 11 o'clock on Sunday on WGAL. Thanks again, and thanks for watching. Well, there's a lot going on in the state capitol these days. Joining me, as often is the case, is two of Harrisburg's leading journalists, two of the state's leading journalists, I should say, Amy Worden from the Philadelphia Inquirer and Brad Bumsted from the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. Welcome, both of you.
Great to be here, Terry.
Well, I'll tell you what, we have a lot to talk about. As we tape this, the budget has not been settled, but certainly the issues have been joined. I think we would all agree. We understand the issues, correct? We may not know exactly how they're going to get resolved. Brad, let me start with you. I want to get into each of them in a moment, but let's talk about sort of the panoramic view. What are the differences that exist between the governor and particularly the Senate Republicans as we speak at the moment?
Sure. It's been a classic struggle between the Democratic governor and a Republican-controlled Senate, and it's really been an issue about their agendas. And what that breaks down to specifically is the governor most recently has insisted that what he needs to be considered with the budget is his alternative energy program. It will create an $850 million fund that would be paid for through debt funded by a surcharge, which he says is not a tax, and the Republicans say is definitely a tax. From the Republicans' point of view, they're saying do the budget first, then maybe we'll talk about the alternative energy program. And they're saying no taxes, we don't care how small, how big, how medium, whatever. No taxes got to be part of this deal.
Last week, Amy, or I should say as the show airs around the state, last week there was a rally, the anniversary of the infamous pay hike, I guess. That really has had some reverberations. I mean, we talk about an event. I mean, that event still lives today, and in a sense it's being played out in this big budget battle.
Yeah, absolutely, Terry. Here we are 2 years out from the pay raise, and its effects are still being felt. We don't have a state budget, and it's past the deadline. And the leadership that is in charge of the Senate Republicans, who are holding their ground against Rendell's what they view as a tax and spend budget, were elected as a result of voter outrage over those who were responsible for the pay raise 2 years ago. But remember, the pay raise was part of a deal that brought, that gave Governor Rendell what he wanted in the budget 2 years ago. He said the only reason I supported it, he said it was constitutional, but it was part of a deal-making process, and that's what we're involved in right now.
Right. Now, plus, in addition to that, the reverberations brought 55 new members, right, Brad, to the legislature, many of them more conservative, many of them, as Amy just pointed out, putting their hands up saying, no new taxes, no fees, no what?
No mas.
No mas.
Oh, yeah. Bigger point here being that this is part of the problem in getting a resolution, because that brought a new leadership in the Senate, a new leadership, certainly a new speaker in the House, a new leadership on the Democratic side with the #2 Democrat gone. All of this still is very much in flux.
And it goes even deeper than the pay raise. It goes back to 2003, Rendell's first year, when the Senate Republican leadership finally, they held out throughout the year, but finally agreed to a 10% increase in the personal income tax that Rendell wanted, and conservative Republicans have never forgave them for that. And that, combined with the pay raise, I think, led to their defeat in primary elections.
Now let's talk a little bit about one of the proposals that is sort of the linchpin to getting a resolution of this. A couple of weeks ago, the governor said that he wanted some dedicated funding for transportation and the mass transit. Now, I know, Amy, you've written about SEPTA and the complex problems with SEPTA and the fact that a lot of rural legislators in particular don't want to vote for SEPTA funding without some reform, as they would put it, without some changes in the way in which SEPTA operates. We don't have to get into the details of that, but is that something that it now looks like that's pretty well been worked out? Is that right?
Yeah, there was concern that there would be a reconstitution of the SEPTA board, and suburban lawmakers, many of whom, Philadelphia lawmakers, many of whom constituents do use SEPTA, said, well, you know, if we're going to support this, then we want to be able to have our say on the board as well.
Right. So, in effect, when they talked about reconstituting the board, they were going to add, I think they were going to add some new members, and that would have given the Philadelphia membership control over the rates, and so the suburban members would have had nothing to say about it.
Right,
is that correct?
right.
Or they couldn't have stopped the rate hike. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, and I guess, Brad, because you kind of write for a paper that has a lot of rural readers as well as Pittsburgh, the point is that rural legislators are just reluctant in general to support a lot of things for urban Pennsylvania. Let me put it that way.
Historically, they have been. They've been skittish about anything for mass transit, and the only way it's ever gone through historically has been that roads and bridges are included with mass transit, so that rural and suburban legislators also have something to take back home.
Yeah,
and
now,
that's part of this deal, too.
Yeah, now it looks like it's pretty much of a done deal that there'll be Route 80, which has not been tolled, will be tolled, and that the revenue coming from that will be used to go into both the mass transit and roads and bridges. Is that correct? Does that look like the sense of what deal we have?
Yeah, and that's one of the compromises that the governor says that he has made as part of this budget negotiation. He wanted to privatize the turnpike. He wanted an oil profits tax.
Well, let me stop you right there. Is that dead, leasing the turnpike?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Okay, Brad, you agree?
It's as dead as anything ever is.
In Harrisburg, knowing that when you go to reporting, you may end up seeing that story. And they've given up on the tax on oil profits, correct?
That was DOA.
That was you agree?
Yeah. That wasn't even up for discussion.
Not even up for discussion. All right, we're going to continue this discussion with this little update. What were the central problems behind the budget problem this year in the Commonwealth after these words?
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society, doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association, business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. We don't know if we have a budget, as state budget, Pennsylvania state budget as of this airing, but I'll tell you one thing we do know. We do understand what the problems are that have kept us from getting a budget. Joining me, as often is the case, is Amy Worden from the Philadelphia Inquirer and Brad Bumsted from the Pittsburgh Tribune Review. All right, Amy, look. Is there anything really new in this? I mean, here we are, at least we will have been almost a week after the constitutional deadline. Without a budget, or almost a week. Tell me what's new, if anything, about this.
Well, there's some things that are new, but on the one thing that is not new is that Rendell is employing the same strategy that he has every year since he was elected. The budget is his leverage, and this is his opportunity to cut deals with the legislature, whether it was originally his school funding, and we had a split budget, and it dragged on through the whole year, or gambling. Or other, big ticket bond issues that he wanted over the years, economic development and the environment. Now you have basically the reform train colliding with Rendell's mandate train. Which he says, I was elected in a landslide in November. Yep. The voters have given me the thumbs up to go ahead here, and these are the things that I want. In this case, it's alternative energy, and it's elements of his health care proposal and dedicated transportation funding.
Brad.
Well, in that sense, she's right, and that's a great analogy. But there are things that are new in this, and one is that you have new leaders in the Senate who are trying to make a name for themselves. And this agenda is really about the next 3.5 years. It's not just the battle now between Rendell and Senate Republicans. It's who's going to have the power during the remainder of Rendell's second term. And that's what I really think is going on here. Rendell's at the zenith of his power now. It declines gradually as he heads toward being out of office.
That's right. He probably has one more year.
Yes.
7th and 8th years, you've been covering this. They're pretty much, the legislature gets more antsy, wants to have more involvement.
Looking at the next election.
Yeah, I was going to say, both of you will start writing stories about who will, who's going to replace Rendell, but go ahead, I interrupted you.
But that, and then combined with the new leaders, Scarnati and Pileggi, who have to establish
Senate
themselves.
Republican leaders, right.
And are really trying to draw the line and say, we're standing on principle.
But that goes back to Amy's bigger point about the legacy of the reform, in a sense, because they all know that voters in some parts of the state elected people with a very different agenda than Governor Rendell, which I guess is the nature of, of two branches of state government with differing responsibilities.
Right. Well, that's right. And the Senate Republicans say they have as much of a mandate to rule as Rendell does.
But and Governor will start, and he already has, he does have a lot more control over the press. I don't mean control, but yeah.
Thanks a lot.
No. You know what I mean. He has the ability to go out and make a lot more news. Let me put it that way.
Bigger soapbox.
Yeah, bigger soapbox. No, he doesn't control you. I'm well aware of that. All right, let's before we go, let me just talk about one more thing. The Republicans have complained that the governor keeps raising the ante. That once they get transportation does, then he turns to energy. Then he turns. Is that back to your point about how he keeps trying to leverage whatever he needs to do to get this budget done?
Well, the governor would say, look, I laid this all out in February.
That's right.
You had, what was it, 145 days or something to think about this and to work on it and come to, let's come to a deal on this. The Republicans would say the target is always moving. Yeah. Exactly how much is that tax, or exactly how much are we borrowing, or how much is needed, and that's
and that's
where things are fuzzy.
Yeah, and he's been going after them on this program. In fact, he said they get paid to be full-time. They're really acting like they're part-time, as he's gotten it, he's really put the heat on them to get this thing done.
He has, and I really think it's strategy on Rendell's part when they talk about it being all over the map and moving. I don't know if you're a boxing fan, Terry, but a left-handed fighter, an unorthodox style, that's really what we're seeing here. He tries to keep the legislature off balance. Right. I want this, I want that. And
he succeeds a little bit, doesn't he?
He does, but I think the response to that, the counter has been from the Senate Republicans. They now have two people speaking, Scarnati and Pileggi, and we sometimes hear different stories from them.
Yeah. All right, great update as always. Well, when we come back, we're going to get our monthly update from the business community. We'll hear about their response to the governor and his budget after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association, Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money, and by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education, 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Joining me now is Gene Barr. He's Vice President for Government Relations, One of the
Government and Public Affairs.
Government and Public Affairs with the Pennsylvania Chamber. Gene, we don't know how this, at the taping, as we pointed out at the beginning of the show, we're not quite sure how this will get resolved. One of the big issues, of course, is the governor's energy program. Another one is transportation and highways and SEPTA and how they're dealing with the mass transit. We're trying to get inside right now, and understand more in detail the complexity of these programs for our viewers. Gene, let's talk a little bit about the energy side of things. This seems like fairly simple to me, and you're going to tell me why I'm wrong, I'm sure. But, $5.40, let's say, $5.50, whatever it is a year, that folks would be, pay more in their electric bill. A set of bonds would be issued by the state, something like $850 million. That would go into a fund for, grants and other energy-related activities to, end our reliance on fuels, on, carbon-based fuels, and we'll do more environmentally friendly programs. From the business community's point of view, what's wrong with that idea?
Well, first off, let's completely set aside the notion that opposition to a tax means opposition to alternative energy.
Okay.
Alternative energy must be pursued. Pennsylvania has done that job. In fact, many of the Chamber's own members are heavily invested in developing what the next alternative energy technology is, whether it's a technology to heat and cool your home or the technology that's going to drive your motor vehicle into the next century, perhaps. And the reason that they're involved is because the person or the company that finds that technology stands to make quite a bit of money off of it. I mean, the free market actually does work in terms of driving that. Our concern comes about from the fact that we don't understand why, having mandated a market for alternative energy in 2004, that market will grow to 18% of the total offering, why we now need to go out and borrow $850 million, most of which will be given to alternative energy companies. We just don't quite understand what is the downfall in the mandated market so far.
Is your point that you think the market system itself, because of the growing demand, will attract sufficient capital? Is that your point, that we don't need government assistance or government resources to do it? I mean, is that your...
Well, since we've created a government program that basically says all of the utilities of Pennsylvania must supply by a certain date, 18% of their offerings must be alternative energy, again, you've got to believe those companies are going to be coming here in order to supply that energy. You've got to be in relative close proximity to that. So having to go out and borrow hundreds of millions of dollars, spend it in 3 years or so, and then spend the next 27 paying that off on a bond just doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense to us, particularly when we're going to have to be taxing residents and business and other industries and institutions across Pennsylvania to pay for that.
There's a dispute, I take it, and as I followed this debate that's been going on in the legislature, there's also a dispute about the actual cost, or the fee that would be paid. I think the $5.40 is one figure for residential, and then a couple of $100 for small businesses. On the Senate side, particularly among the Republicans, they've pointed out that may actually be more than that. What's your take on that?
Well, the cost to any given business is going to be determined by what kind of business you're in. And I've talked to a number of small to medium-sized businesses that are pretty heavily energy intensive and are going to stand to spend thousands of dollars for this, not hundreds of dollars for this. And you have to wonder what that does for their competitiveness. Also, from talking to folks in the hospital side, it looks like most hospitals, because they are very energy-intensive industries, are going to be spending $10,000 per year. And, of course, once this tax is in, like many other taxes we have in PA and other places, taxes unfortunately tend, A, to stick around, and B, to grow.
To be increased. So your concern would be this is, you know, the camel's nose under the proverbial tent, that in effect, conceivably, it could be used and continue to grow. That obviously has now become the linchpin of some kind of settlement in the legislature, but there's some other issues that are being pretty hard fought. The one that, other than energy, that was being mostly hard fought dealt with the transportation side of things.
Correct.
I don't want to talk about that. I don't think there's any doubt that this state needs infusion of funds to deal with the infrastructure. Do you basically agree with that?
Absolutely, we would agree with that.
6,000 bridges in a state of disrepair, something like 9,000 roads, plus the mass transit. So we're all in agreement that there's a problem here.
Correct.
Is the debate over how we fix the problem, not that we agree there is a problem?
Yes, and I think the debate is also over the mix, and as you pointed out, how we approach that. Of course, you have the differences between mass transit, as you've pointed out already, and the roads and bridges across, and certainly we believe that both sides need that. We have members who utilize both, of course, and who need mass transit to get their folks to work. And what's interesting is it seems we're pretty close on some agreement here relative to the budget, and now it seems to have drifted apart a little bit more, which is unfortunate. But I think that seems to be a lot closer than we are on one or two of the other issues.
All right, we're talking with Gene Barr from the Pennsylvania Chamber, getting his reaction to the governor's budget proposals. We'll be back after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Builders Association, building today for a better tomorrow, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. We're talking with Gene Barr from the Pennsylvania Chamber about the business community's reaction to some aspects of Governor Rendell's budget. At this airing, we're not quite sure where the budget will be passed yet, but we certainly understand the issues, and we're getting into them now. Gene, let's talk a little bit about, I thought there was kind of a consensus growing that, the Turnpike Commission would run Route 80. They would put tolls at these intervals, 30 or 35 miles, and how is that generally being received, particularly in the northern part of the state?
Well, up in the northern part of the state, there is some concern over that because, of course, in that part, as many other interstates are, used as commuter roads, so people are concerned about adding this on. It seems that with most of the proposals out there, I-80 probably will get done. There are some residual legal questions over exactly how that works and can you take the dollars and where they can be put that I think they have to work through, but it seems like it will. Yeah. But you're right, there have been some concerns expressed by those up there, and justifiably so, over commuter issues. Yeah,
but the real problem is, let's say, for the sake of this debate, we need about $1 billion a year to put in roads, bridges, and mass transit, whatever the exact number is. Once we get to talking about $1 billion or $1.2 billion or $1.7 billion, which was the original. We are talking about some need to raise money somewhere for that dedicated funding, and no one was interested in leasing the Turnpike. That idea went nowhere.
The whole leasing issue didn't work. The gasoline tax issue obviously didn't work because people, as you've already noted, really don't want to do a tax right now, even though we would support, reasonable motor fuel tax increases because they really are user fees, and I think that's how a lot of people view the tolling as well. User fees for that, because there's a direct correlation between what you pay and what you get to use.
Right. We have about a minute left. I'm going to go back to the energy point. There are some things in the governor's plan that you're not opposed to, right?
No, of course not.
Go ahead.
No, of course not. There's the whole concept of smart meters. Mandating them to us, again, doesn't make a lot of sense because their record is mixed. If you go out to some places that have done them, the record is decidedly mixed, but doing a pilot project on that. Some of the utilities would perhaps look at some low-income assistance for energy, looking at some other things, certainly conservation and educating people more about how we can conserve energy and better appliances to use make a lot of sense. But again, implementing a brand new tax on top of the fact we've mandated a market to us is something that truly concerns us, and borrowing $850 million and adding that to the government's debt certainly is a concern.
All right, thanks, Gene. Thanks for watching Pennsylvania Newsmakers. We'll see you next week, and stay well.